Okay, I'm gonna give the blueberries a go. Blueberries are actually the easiest part. The shadows, the big shadows, you could do them one solid block, but I like to make them kind of a gradient, and that's where I get messed up a lot on these. So if you're a beginner, I would suggest maybe just doing a gradient of 2 colors. If you're more experienced, you can get the dark right up against the blueberry, and then some medium and some light. Toning my canvas with a combination of Indian yellow hue and a dot of quinacridone red. And I've been asked a lot how I choose my color schemes. I'm going to show you my color wheel in a second. So there won't be much orange showing in the final painting, I don't think. But little pups of it might show through. So I have 3 colors in mind that I'm going to use for a triadic color scheme. So my blueberries will be blue violet. I'm going to be using my fluid acrylics, and I have Prussian blue. If you don't have Prussian blue, you can take one of your other blues like phthalo blue or ultramarine blue and try adding in some brown, so maybe some burnt sienna or raw sienna, or you could add a touch of like ivory black to kind of darken it up. So here we go with the blue violet. And then for the triad, we have red orange. So that's why I did red orange for the background here. And I'm gonna do my shadows and the shadows and the background, a combination, a variety of yellow greens. And so I'll tell you what I'm mixing as I go along. For right now, I'm gonna let this dry, and then I'm going to map out my blueberries. All right, now that this is dry, I'm gonna mix a little bit more of this color, but I'm not gonna water it down like I did to tone the background. And I'm going to map out my blueberries here. If I don't fit them all or get the exact composition, that's fine. I'm not going to be too picky. You can always add in more or take some out if there's too many and it's overwhelming. It might be a little bit too high. Try to make some of them a little bit bigger or a little bit smaller. And I don't want them all perfectly lined up either. Just trying to get the angle of the shadows right. I think I'm gonna skip that one, as I probably made everything a little bit too big. That's okay. one kind of going off the edge there. I think that balances everything a little bit better. This one will come right down to this edge here. All right, so once I have everything mapped out, I'm gonna grab a clean brush. I did a little test with my blues. If you don't have Prussian blue, try, and you do have ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, try mixing a tiny bit of burnt sienna into your ultramarine blue. That gave me a really nice, pretty blueberry color. Second choice for me was the phthalo blue, if you have the red shade, plus a little burnt sienna. And you could also try any of the other browns, or the tiny dot of black if you don't have brown. Or you could mix some brown by mixing an orange and then putting a little bit of blue into it. Okay, so I'm going to use my Prussian blue just because I have it and it's convenient for me to just use this. So I'm starting with just Prussian blue and white. The blueberries are pretty easy. So all we're gonna do for each of them is just kind of squint your eyes. The center is what stands out first, right? That's the darkest value. So I'm gonna make a mark in the center. Not a perfect circle, I'm just gonna kind of make a mark. And then the shadow side of my blueberry is gonna be a little bit lighter than the middle here, but still dark. And then this is the light side of my blueberry. So 3 shades, dark, medium dark, and then a little bit lighter. And then that's gonna give you a lot of dimension. After that, it's up to you how much detail you wanna add in. Depends on how realistic you want them to be. You can start to add these little highlights if you want to. You can put a couple of highlights around the center, and that'll really draw your eye into the middle here. Okay, so I'm gonna take just some Prussian blue and I'm gonna put some in the center of most of the blueberries here. Not a circle. You can do a circle, but it's just a little bit more realistic to not do a circle. And then I'm going to keep using the same brush, and I'm going to take a really small amount of white, spritzing my palette with a little bit of water because it's really hot here. And my paint is going to dry out on me quickly. So I'm mixing a little bit of white into my Prussian blue. And I'm going to put this on the shadowed side of my blueberries. picked up a little bit of burnt sienna. That'll just darken it. It's okay. I don't want each one to look exactly the same, so I'm trying to just vary the shape a little bit while keeping everything on the shadow side for the most part. I'm going to add a little bit more white now for the light side of the blueberry. Kind of going around the top on some of them. And I'll do a couple of layers to get a little bit more detail. Hopefully you see some form starting to take shape with the different values here. I don't think I mentioned I'm using a number 7 short handle brush. I like this one. I think it has good dimension. I'm going to, let's see. All right, I think now I'm going to just add a little bit more detail. So I'll go over the dark side again, and I could have gone a little bit lighter on the light side here, but I'll just add some lighter color on my second pass of the blueberries. Actually, I think while that's drying, what I'll do is switch to my first layer of shadows and put a layer on the background, and then I'll go back to the blueberries. So I'm using the same dirty brush, and I just added a little bit of my Ben's Yellow, which is the replacement for Hansa Yellow that I used to always use. And I'm mixing a little bit of my blue, my Prussian blue, into the yellow to make a green. And next to the blueberries, the darkest, I'm going to make this green the darkest part of the shadow. And I'm going to go over my blueberries again, so don't worry if you get a little bit of green paint on your blueberries like I did right here. forgot this one. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit more yellow and maybe a touch of white. And if you look really close on the reference photo, you can see that there's a little bit of a ring around the shadow that's a little bit lighter. So I'm just kind of putting that in nice and loose. I'm going to go a little bit lighter with a little bit more yellow and white and spritz my palette. You don't want to over spritz your palette because your paint will break down, but it's a good way to keep the paint on your palette wet. I'm going to go in with a little bit more dark, just right up against, well, I guess I have to wipe my brush on my paper towel, and then all right, I'm going to leave the shadows alone for right now. I don't want to overwork them at this point. Some of them are probably going to be fine, and some of them I might go back and touch up again. Since I have this color already mixed, I'm going to add a little bit of this into some white and use it on the background. I think I'm going to grab a brush that's a little bit bigger. This one's a number 12. Okay, so I added white to my palette, and I added some yellow and a little bit of my green mixture. I have this color right now. It's kind of a light yellow green. And my brush is a number 12, short handle. You know what, I think I'm gonna grab a smaller brush in a minute so I can get in a little tighter in the smaller areas. This one's good for the bigger areas. I'll touch up my sides. Okay, I think the smaller brush is going to work. Let me see what I have clean. I'm just grabbing this one, it's a number 7. And I'm okay with leaving some little pops of orange showing, especially right now. I can always cover them up more as I go along if I want to, but I think it works well with this color scheme. You don't have to be too precious with your brush strokes right now because you can go over everything again. So if you accidentally cut into a shadow a little bit too much or into a blueberry a little bit too much, you just touch it up in the next layer. All right, I'm intentionally leaving that amount of orange showing, knowing that a little bit more of it will be covered up. I like this size brush for my blueberries, so I'm just going to give it a quick rinse. And then I'm going to go back to my darker Prussian blue and reestablish all of the dark areas. So I still have some Prussian blue that's wet on my palette. And I'm going over the middle of the blueberry, just with the dabbing with the corner of my brush. And add a tiny bit of white. I'm going to go over the shadow side of my blueberry. It's really hot in my studio, and so I did not leave any drying time between layers. If it's not hot where you are, you might want to wait a couple of minutes after going from the background or the shadows to the blueberries. But my studio is probably 90 degrees right now. So everything's drying up on me really quick. I'm trying to be a little bit better about the shape now to try to get these a little bit more round. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more white. And I'm going to start to add some details. So there's a little bit of a ring around some of the middle of the blueberries where the light is hitting it, like right here, right here. I'm not going to paint it in all perfectly, but I'm going to take the edge of my brush and start to put in a few details, especially around that center part of the blueberry. And I'll do this again with some lighter paint. I'm using just the corner of the brush. I'm adding a little bit more white. And now I'm going to try to get the lighter side of the blueberry a little bit more round. I'm adding more white. I'm going to start to put in a few light spots. Again, just with the corner of my brush. You could use a teeny tiny brush if you wanted to, but I'm fine with my blueberries being loose, so I'm using the larger brush. If you're trying to be super realistic, then you might want to use a really little brush. I'm just wiping some excess paint off on my paper towel. And now I'm looking at each blueberry, and if it doesn't look round enough to me, I'm going in with a little bit of paint and trying to round it out a little bit more. I'll probably do another pass on the background, and when I paint the background, that will help me reshape some of the blueberries as well. I'm just going in with a little bit more lighter blue just to add to that highlighted side a little bit. Now some super light blue. Right around the inside. I like this blueberry and this blueberry. I think they have a good amount of different shades of blue. I'm going to try to add just a few more different values to each one. Just kind of go back and forth with your darks and lights. And fuss with them a little bit. All right, so you get the idea. I'm not going to sit here and fuss for an hour. I think they're pretty good. Just a little bit of a highlight. All right. I am going to, let's see. I think I'm going to touch up the shadows a tiny bit. For the most part, I like them. And then I'll do one more pass on the background and hopefully we'll be finished. All right, so I'm adding a little bit of Prussian blue into my yellow. My brush was a little bit too wet because the paint is a little bit runny. A little more blue. And I want the darkest. Closest to the blueberry. And then I'll add more yellow. You can add a little bit of white if you want to. Get that lighter ring around the shadow. Gonna add a little bit more white. And try to have it almost fade into the background color a little bit. All right, shadows are something I could fuss with all day, so I think I'm pretty much going to leave them like this. I'm going to do one last light ring around the outside of some of them, and then I'm going to go right into my background color. Okay, I'm going to stop myself. I'm just going to wipe off the excess paint on my brush. I'm going to grab a whole bunch of white and make my green lighter. I'm going to be a little bit more careful this time. I can use the background to shape the blueberries. So if you have a wonky blueberry, you can make it nice and round by painting the negative space around it. If your shadow is too big, right, you can push the shadow back. You can kind of make this shadow a little bit smaller. Make this shadow a little bit smaller. I kind of messed up my blueberry here. I'm gonna grab a clean brush. And some blue. I'm working on 2 brushes now. I'll just fix it up a little. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them right on Patreon or in the Facebook group. The link for the Facebook group is below in the description. Or if you paint something else, another fruit still life, feel free to post that as well. I don't know, lately I've been feeling like I want to paint a bunch of still lifes. I'm a little tired of flowers at the moment. That happens to me once in a while. I want to work on some house plants too. I did try to make a house plant tutorial, but it was a little bit disastrous, so I'm going to go back to that. I'm just touching everything up now. Doing my best not to ruin it. I'm just going to take an extra minute because usually when I shut the camera off, that's when I see spots that I want to fix. All right, I'm pretty happy with my blueberries. I hope you have fun with this one. I'm really gonna stop now. Thanks for watching.